Packers fans just got some news today that absolutely nobody in Green Bay was hoping to hear. And honestly, I think a lot of us kind of knew this was coming, but it still hits different when it's actually confirmed. I'm Jacob Brandenburg, and this is the Go Pack Show. And today we're talking about a report that's going to shape how we all think about the start of this Packers season. So here's the deal. Micah Parsons, the Packers' star edge rusher, is now expected to miss the first 3 to 4 games of the regular season. This isn't some random rumor floating around on social media either. This is coming from Matt Schneidman, who covers the Green Bay Packers beat for The Athletic, which means this is about as credible a source as you're going to get on something like this. It's been picked up and tweeted out by Underdog NFL and a bunch of other accounts at this point. So this is spreading fast, and it's the kind of news that just sucks the energy right out of a fan base that was building up so much excitement for this season. I'll be honest with you, I rushed home from work still in my work clothes just to sit down and talk to you about this. I didn't even bother changing. I know I'm wearing Vikings purple right now, and I know that's going to throw some of you off. But forgive me on that front, because today isn't about what I'm wearing. It's about what this news means for the Green Bay Packers and for this defense heading into the season. Let's talk about who Micah Parsons actually is for a second, because I think sometimes we take it for granted just how special this guy is. Micah Parsons is, in my opinion, one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL right now. I put him in that same tier as guys like Myles Garrett and whoever else you want to throw into that conversation of true difference makers on defense. This isn't just a good player. This is a game-wrecking, scheme-changing, offensive coordinator's nightmare type of player. And when you lose a player like that for a chunk of the season, it's not just about the box score. Yes, there's the obvious production piece. We're talking about a guy who's put up more than a dozen sacks in individual seasons. That kind of pass rush production doesn't just disappear and get replaced by depth pieces. But it's more than sacks. It's the pressure he generates even when he doesn't get home. It's the way he draws double teams and opens things up for the rest of the front seven. It's the leadership in that locker room and on that sideline. Micah brings an energy and a competitive standard that other guys feed off of, and that's hard to quantify, but it's very real. And we saw exactly what happens when Green Bay doesn't have him. Remember what happened last season when Micah went down with that injury? The whole defense fell off a cliff. Green Bay sputtered down the stretch, the pass rush basically evaporated, and it led directly into an early playoff exit without Parsons anchoring that defensive line. So this isn't some theoretical concern. We have actual recent evidence of what a Micah-less Packers defense looks like, and it wasn't pretty. So now the big question everybody in Green Bay has to be asking is, who steps up in Micah's absence for these first 3 or 4 games? This is where it gets interesting, and honestly this is where I think there's a little bit of opportunity buried inside all this bad news. I mentioned earlier this week, and I'll bring it up again now, Barron Sorrell, the second-year pass rusher out of Texas. Sorrell didn't put up huge numbers as a rookie. I'm not going to sit here and pretend he did, but if you actually watch the tape, there were flashes. There were reps where you saw the get off, the bend, the motor, the stuff that made scouts excited about him coming out of college. And from everything I'm hearing, he's put in serious work this offseason. He's training like a guy who knows an opportunity is coming. And now it looks like that opportunity is going to come a lot sooner than anybody expected. This could be the exact type of situation where a young player make his leap, forced into early game action because the starter is out, and instead of sinking he swims. Then you've got Colin Oliver out of Oklahoma State, another young, developing pass rusher who has shown some real promise in limited chances. The question with Oliver is whether he's ready for this big of a stage this early in his career. Replacing one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL is not a small assignment for anybody, let alone a guy who's still getting his feet wet at the professional level. But sometimes that's exactly how these things go in the NFL. You don't always get to pick when your number gets called, and how a guy responds to that can define the rest of his career trajectory. And of course, we cannot talk about this defensive line without mentioning Lucas Van Ness. We have been waiting and waiting and waiting for that true breakout game from Van Ness ever since Green Bay drafted him in the first round. He's flashed at times, he's had good moments, but we haven't seen the sustained, every down dominance that a first-round pick at that position is supposed to bring eventually. Maybe, and I really do mean maybe, this is the moment. Sometimes a player needs to be forced into a bigger role before he shows you what he's actually capable of. With Micah out for a month basically, Van Ness is going to get all the reps, all the attention, all the opportunity he could possibly ask for. If it doesn't happen now, I think the questions about him start to get a lot louder. Now, switching gears here for a second, because there's another storyline that's been swirling around Micah Parsons that has absolutely nothing to do with his knee, and it involves his former Cowboys teammate and reportedly one of his closest friends in the league, Trevon Diggs. There was a picture that started circulating recently of Micah working out, and while Micah was obviously the focus since he's the story of the day with this injury news. Everybody's eyes immediately jumped over to Trevon Diggs, standing right there in the same picture. Now here's the twist. Diggs was just recently released by the Green Bay Packers after only spending about 2 games there. It wasn't exactly a memorable stint. There wasn't much production, wasn't much of an impact, and the team ultimately moved on from him. But in this picture, the two of them are working out together, and Diggs is still wearing his Green Bay gear. Not old Cowboys stuff, not neutral training gear, Packers gear. So naturally, that gets people talking. What is that all about? Is this just a guy holding on to some free workout clothes? Or is there something more to it? Could Trevon Diggs be angling for a return to Green Bay? I mean, look, I understand the logic on one side of this. You've invested an enormous amount into Micah Parsons. He's clearly the best player on your roster, and sometimes in professional sports you make accommodations for your superstar's inner circle to keep him happy, comfortable, and focused. But let's be real here. This is the NFL, it's not the NBA. We are not talking about the Milwaukee Bucks keeping a roster spot open for Thanasis Antetokounmpo just so Giannis stays content. And we're not talking about the Lakers drafting LeBron's son so LeBron is happy in Los Angeles. The NFL just does not really operate that way. Roster spots are too valuable, practice squad spots are too valuable, and coaches generally are not in the business of keeping a guy around purely as a favor to a star teammate. That said, I do think Green Bay could make an exception here if they really wanted to, given how much they've invested in Micah being the face of that defense. But personally, if I'm running that front office, I would rather use those roster spots and that coaching attention on developing the younger defensive backs already on the roster, guys who still have carvable upside, or even look toward the draft to find the next legitimate starter or future star in that secondary. Trevon Diggs is a name. There's no denying that. He's had big moments in his career. He's had Pro Bowl level seasons. But big names without production still don't help you win games in December and January. We'll see what Green Bay ultimately decides to do here, because it does sound like, at least from Diggs' side of things, he would be open to running it back and making a return to the Packers roster at some point. Whether Green Bay actually pulls that trigger is a completely different question, and I think a lot of that decision is going to hinge on what they see out of their secondary depth as camp rolls along and as the season actually gets underway. So to wrap all of this up, we are looking at a Packers team that is now going to be without arguably its single best defensive player for a meaningful chunk of the beginning of the season. That is a real problem. It changes the calculus for how fast this team can come out of the gate, and we all know how important it is in today's NFL to not fall behind early, because digging yourself out of a hole in December is a whole lot harder than just building a lead from week 1. At the same time, this situation creates a legitimate opportunity for younger players on this roster, whether that's Baron Sorrell taking that second-year jump, Colin Oliver proving he belongs sooner than expected, or finally getting that signature Lucas Van Ness performance we have been waiting on. And layered on top of all of that, we've got this lingering subplot with Trevon Diggs, and whether he ends up back in Green Bay in some capacity because of his friendship with Micah. There's a lot to monitor here over these next few weeks as training camp continues and as we get closer to that season opener. I'm Jacob Brandenburg. This has been a reaction breakdown on the news that Micah Parsons is expected to be out for the first 3 to 4 games of the season due to that knee injury, plus everything swirling around Trevon Diggs and a potential return to Green Bay. If you found this breakdown helpful, do me a favor and like this video, share it with anybody else who follows this team, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these updates as they keep coming in. We'll keep tracking this story and everything else happening around the Packers right here on the Go Pack Show.